Yeah. So basically, I spent most of my career, as I explained, like pretty early stage companies. So I was doing everything, like everything from uh, the products, but then also like the infrastructure stuff. And given that it was just like a slice of my focus, my approach was never to go that deep and just instead use kind of like generic tools that work no matter what cloud I was in. So eventually found Kubernetes, was building everything with Kubernetes because, whether you're doing Kubernetes in AWS or Google Cloud or whatever, like it's the same. So I kind of built everything in an agnostic way. And a lot of people still do that, and that's fine. And I just got bored, and I was like, what if I did the opposite? And I'm like, what if I go really deep and build like a very AWS native application? Like, what does that look like? And are there benefits? Like, what's worse? What's better? I just wanted to understand all that because basically it was the opposite of my thinking at that point. So I started like actually learning a bunch of AWS stuff more specifically than I knew at that point. Found a lot of the serverless stuff. AWS kind of pioneered a lot of the serverless mindset
They
around
hit
building
that
things.
like a couple years before it kind of caught in with like Vercel and stuff like that, right? I think because wasn't like was it Lambda or was there like an iteration before that that kind of pioneered on the serverless stuff before it kind of became mainstream?
Yeah, I would say there was like a few other attempts prior to Lambda that like because ultimately it's just like a billing model shift and it does require like a crazy amount of technology to enable the billing model shift. But there were a few other services that were trying to build off of usage. But Lambda was obviously the one that really went big, and a lot of the architecture patterns were kind of like discovered in these big like AWS Lambda projects. And that was when I was first exposed to the idea of okay, if you like ignore this agnostic thing, which is like everyone's instinct to be like, oh, how do I optimize for portability? How do I optimize for switching vendors, et cetera? Let's say you just do the opposite. What benefits do you get? So I like, was building stuff in a very AWS native way, understanding all that, understanding what trade-offs there are. Found the tooling for all this to be pretty horrible. So I ended up having to build a bunch of my own stuff to like have the typical nice fast feedback loops, the typical debug process that we're used to. Started building like kind of crappy tools, but they worked. And SST was like a very early, like the first version ever was like launched around that time. And I came across it, and at first I was like, well, they like solved a bunch of problems better than I did, but like, do I really want to use an abstraction? But eventually I just kept improving. So I started to use it, and I'm like, this is great. Then I started to contribute to it.
Right.
And then, I liked the team, and so I ended up joining.
They said
Awesome.
we'll acquire you. We'll acquire the person. So you've obviously contributed before you came and joined the team at SST. How many like contributions would you say on average? Because like everyone in open source and stuff like that, there's like one or two contributions a week and stuff like that, maybe a couple PRs. Like I know I've contributed to like Zero Mail like maybe like once or twice a week for something like that.
Yeah.
Did you just have like these massive like 60,000 line file change commits where they're like, holy cow, man, we're just gonna hire you so that way you can just review it yourself and push it? Or was it like some more subliminal stuff?
Yeah. So it was, I don't know if in terms of like lines of code, I don't really remember, but basically their major hook was this live Lambda thing, which solves the big issue when you're doing a lot of Lambda function development. The loop of like changing code, updating the Lambda, running it was very slow. So they invented like a really cool way to do that. And I looked at that system, and it was a clever way, it's a clever solution, but I thought of a better way to implement it so that it more mimicked the way it actually ran in production, so that it could support all different languages. It could support like, it was just a more accurate simulation of how it really works. So I like basically drew up a diagram of like, here's what you guys have currently, here's the shift I think you should make, and here's like why it benefits. I think I ended up contributing a decent amount of code for that. I'm pretty sure Frank, like, I don't think it was like merged as it is. He like looked at it and like massaged it and got it in. And I was just spending a bunch of time in their Slack, like answering questions, like talking to them, and like coming with other ideas and improving things. And I ended up having like several long. I posted in the Slack at some point, like, hey, I'm like maybe considering it for a new role. Let me know if anyone's interested. And they messaged me. I ended up having like, me and Jay had like 3 meetings that were like 2 hours long each. It was pretty
Wow.
intensive. Both of us are very long-winded. So we're just like, they were like really assessing like my just product ability, like just because, you know, it's 2 of them. Adding a 3rd person is a huge culture impact.
Yeah.
So we're just like really testing out compatibility. And yeah, I think I was just in like the right place in my career, and they were like at the right stage, and it like fit.
Because everything
perfectly.
just synced up and aligned to kind
Yeah.
of make it happen. So how long have you been at SST now?
I think it's gonna be. I think it's been 4 years, either 4 or 5. I think I joined summer 2021. So
Right.
yeah, it'll be 4 years.
That's crazy. So SST, you've been there for 4 years. SST just passed 23,000 stars on the repo, I recall.
Mhm.
How do you measure success for like this open source sort of project? Is it just like star count, number of people helped, number of X
It's really just
posts
it's
of
actually very
yay?
similar to any kind of consumer app. We just look at we're very on top of our numbers. We look at our weekly active users every week, and we to make sure that's going up every week. And obviously npm downloads also something we track, but that's like kind of more of a lagging indicator. Like stuff that you do today that works shows up there like 6 months later. And obviously all the way down to our funnel of revenue obviously is an important part. So I think those 3 things are the things that we typically track.
Money definitely matters, I can say.
Yeah.
If no money, no good. And that's
Yeah, no bueno. So I've been using SST since version 2. I've been in love with it. I've had my hesitations also, as you mentioned, on like having an abstraction layer on top of, you know, CTK constructs and whatnot. But ended up loving it because it's just so that simple. Like, why wouldn't you use it? And with V3, I know you guys have made a move to Pulumi, right?
Yeah.
So how do you like avoid becoming a black box? What is your sort of thinking on how to make things simple, but also not make too many decisions for the users?
Yeah. So if you look at our whole strategy, or our entire purpose of existing is actually just that. It's to make sure that your stuff is not a black box. It's very easy. I wouldn't say very easy, but it's not super hard to build if you want to solve the problem of let's make things easy to deploy, not super hard to like create some kind of hosted service that like lets you connect your GitHub and then deploy it, and you know it works and you like manage all of that. It's a lot harder to then allow users to say, hey, we need to make sure that this header is injected into the request at their CDN layer before it hits the rest of our system, right? It's like an infinite set of permutations of people needing customizability. Obviously, early projects, simple projects don't need those things, but when you're talking about serious companies, enterprise companies, but also just like startups that are growing, they just eventually need some weird customization. And that's really the only reason ST exists, because on day one, you have a nice set of simple components that you can probably use out of the box and you don't need a crazy amount of customization, but it's not really like a black box that you can't reach into. Like you can go in and customize any aspect of how the component works. For the areas that we don't cover, you can fall back to the lower level providers and bring up any kind of infrastructure that you want, whether it's in AWS, in Cloudflare, like Stripe, like whatever it is. And we really build the products for ourselves. The things that we build, a lot of these like newer hosting services, they just can't support the workloads, the type of things that we build. So we still need to manage our own infrastructure, but this is a nice way of still having some of those benefits. But when you outgrow them, you can kind of reach down into the lower layer.